I get the honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, who's none other than California State Parks Director Armando Quintero. Director Quintero has worked for the National Park Service, including some of the parks and sites right here in the Bay Area and at UC Merced. He served on the board of the Marin Municipal Water District, a Together Bay Area member. He played a key role in the MOU that was formed between the Yurok tribe and the state of California to co-manage lands in the tribe's territory. And he's a vocal champion for landscape scale land stewardship, for collaboration, and for equity. So please join me in welcoming Director Quintero to the stage for a conversation with Annie.
Thank you, Armando, so much for being here and joining us today. I know that you have a big job and it's a very busy time of year. And so I'm really glad that you're here. And I also want to thank you. You know, you're coming back, actually. You were kind enough to speak at our 2020 online conference. We took some bold steps to try to convene conferences online, you know, relatively early in the pandemic. And you were kind enough to join us. That was about 10,000 Zoom calls or many moons ago. So thank you for coming back and being a champion of the work that we're doing here in the Bay Area. Let's set the stage. Armando, what's on your plate? What's on your radar? What are the things that you are dealing with as State Parks Director?
Thank you, Annie. And I always really have enjoyed talking with you and participating with the folks in Bay Area together. It's really my privilege. And I always say that whatever it is that I'm doing is the most important thing that I can be doing. So here we are. I've been in this role for 2.5 years, and I'll quickly tell a story about the first day of work, which was September 1, 2020. Some of you have heard this before, but what happened is I was sworn in by Zoom at the Big Basin Emergency Operations Center. And my boss had called me the day before, said, we're going to Zoom you, we're going to swear you in by Zoom. Then you're going to go up and tour the headquarters of Big Basin, which, as many of you probably know, it's the oldest state park in the state park system. And were it not for the Sempervirens Fund, it would probably not exist as you know it today anyway, in terms of the boundaries. But that entire park burned to the ground. And when I got sworn in, the superintendent walked me around the corner, and there stood about 40 employees in their park uniforms, clearly having been fighting fire for days. They looked exhausted. And just as I was going to say hello, the superintendent told me that half of them had lost everything in that fire. So it was like, welcome to your job. And honestly, I started crying. And I said, I can't speak to all of you at once. Let's break out into groups of 5 or 6 so I can meet you. That's what I did. And then we went to headquarters, toured it. And then, as my boss had told me the day before, at 1 o'clock, around 1 o'clock, my boss and the governor showed up with media and staffers. And we walked, the team at Big Basin and I walked with the governor around the whole headquarters, showing them the damage and talking about the fire. And just one wild fact about the nature of those fires. At the Big Basin headquarters, at the height of the fire, as many of you know, coast redwoods are about 300 feet tall. And I asked what the flame heights were at the headquarters from some of the CAL FIRE people that were there. Flame heights were 600 feet. So we're walking back for a press conference. Governor turns and pulls me next to him, and he says, everybody stops, and he goes, hey, this is our new state parks director. And he goes, Armando was just sworn in 5 hours ago. And then he says, Armando, what's your vision for the California state park system? And the reason I tell that story is my answer is what ended up, it still guides me today. Basically, I said, hey, look, the traditions around how we manage public lands in California began around 1864 in terms of sort of more current society, right? And since 1864, we've been, sort of piling up these traditions. And I said, look around. I said, these traditions are not serving us. They're not working. What we need to do is reimagine everything we're doing. And I said, we need the best science. We need the best wisdom. And today, with the diversity of humanity, there's even more wisdom in the room than we can imagine, including, really tapping into the traditional knowledge of the indigenous people of California. And I just talked about some of those challenges. And I also said, look, here we stand at what I thought was the height of COVID. And these public lands are essential landscapes. It's where everybody or many people are going to find healing for their hearts and minds and bodies. And we need these places. And so our challenge is, how do we reimagine these places to truly put us on a trajectory for sustainability well into the future, and not just by turning around and repeating what we've done before. Mm-hmm. So that, and so look, I mean, my first days in the job, we were dealing with catastrophic fires, unlike anything we've seen in our contemporary history. And then we went into drought. And within the drought, we had heat events where people were dying. And again, people went to public lands to escape those heat events. And then when I look at California really has a necklace of state parks. It sort of surrounds the outer borders of the state, but the valley is fairly bereft of public lands, state parks, in particular. So I've been looking at all of that, and how do we look at the places where we live, think about the future, and then we get these atmospheric rivers that were just mind-blowing, river-blowing. In fact, my background is actually an image that I just took at the Tuolumne River just a few days ago. I mean, the rivers of California right now are absolutely alive and thriving, and we need to be working with these waterscapes. We need to be working with these landscapes in ways that are very different than what we've been accustomed. Sorry, excuse me anyway. Ways that we've been accustomed to, or customizing ourselves to over the last century and a half. Within all of these events, we're dealing with social trauma, societal trauma, and and add on top of that, the political and social issues that are going on. Our jobs as public land stewards are really so important. And so one of the questions I have every day and all the time is, how do we best serve these public lands and the public? And just as a quick picture, I didn't really understand what's the California Department of Recreation encompassed when I accepted the position. But just to give you a quick picture, because there's some things here that I did not know, and some of you may not know this. State Parks is 280 parks around California, soon to be 281. I also oversee the Department of Boating and Waterways, which has education programs. We deal with invasive species. We pay for law enforcement training on the water. And we invest in removing abandoned boats and waterways in the waters of California. It's an amazing operation. I also oversee the Off-Highway Vehicle Division, which oversees 9 off-highway vehicle parks in California, and finally the State Historic Preservation Office, which does a lot of work around the regulatory work in California, including Section 106 work. So in the course of a day, my world is a little bit of everything, with sort of like being in a shopping mall. You turn the corner and there's a whole new world in front of you. I'm in a shopping mall that is California, and within those 4 divisions: parks, boating and waterways, off-highway vehicles, and the State Historic Preservation Office. One of the things that's very cool that people don't know is each of those divisions has grants programs. Last year, we actually distributed almost $600 million in grants to communities around California. The grants programs that are run by these offices are not grants to go to state parks, but they are grants managed by state parks that get invested in communities, in waterways, in Forest Service and BLM and other lands where there's off-highway vehicle programs. And it's sort of amazing to look at the impact of that because, I think about literally the power of the purse. What can we do if we're going to be distributing these funds and making sure that we're investing in efforts that really are going to make a difference in the longer trajectory of the work that we have to do? I find myself thinking about the challenge that we have in sort of comporting deep time with our human time scale. And oftentimes it's just a wonderful way to look at the work that we're doing and what can we affect in the moment that we are in. I mean, literally a moment that we are in. And I'll mention, for example, the work being done by Save the Redwoods League and other groups around the giant sequoias of the state and the coast redwoods. There are projects that are happening right now and that have been underway for a few years. And the way that I think of those is that we're doing work that actually is going to mature in 2,000 years.
Wow.
What that's amazing. And it really, really is important and gives me pause in terms of what do we think about. And I'll hurry up and finish here, Annie, but one of the really big areas of interest for me is tribal relationships. And recently when I signed an MOU with one of the rancherias up in Trinidad at the event, which is the world of the Klamath River, where we're now going to be removing dams on the Klamath, I looked at this whole group of indigenous people and community members, and I said, you know what? These MOUs are really the cultural equivalent of removing a dam. And so the metaphor that we can each find in the daily work that we do actually can change our language, which ends up changing our thinking, which I hope improves our communications with each other. 3 things really quickly. Data. When I came into state parks, frankly, it was really hard for me to get information easily. And I am so excited. We are working with a team to put together a data warehouse of everything that we can within state parks. And I got a briefing on that yesterday. It was absolutely stunning because it's everything from budget, people, events, law enforcement, it's just everything. And so I'm really excited about being to operate in a world where when we look at a park, we can really take a deep dive in a swimming pool that's full of everything that has to do that has to do with that park. I mentioned language. Yesterday, I was also meeting with our traditionally it's called the Human Resources Office. And as I was talking with them, I was talking about language. And our newest hire said, in industry, human resources isn't really used that often. In fact, what organizations are using more often than not is something that basically says people. So yesterday we started calling our own HR office the people office, which I really loved. And then finally, diversity. And my favorite metaphor for diversity is an ecotone. Many of you know what that is, but if you don't, imagine a meadow and a forest or a tide pool. Those are places where there's intersections of systems. And in a tide pool, you have the ocean floor, air, and fluctuations and what's happening in that zone. Those are always the richest areas in the natural systems that we encounter, where the air meets land. It's all those places. And so when I think of diversity, not only do I think of it in terms of the systems that we manage and are we looking toward healthy diversity, but the people that are a part of the leadership and field teams that are working on it. So that was a long answer. There you go.
I love hearing your stories, Armando. Thank you. You don't need to apologize at all. One thing I want to flag is that Cedric Mitchell from your team is going to be at the conference tomorrow to talk about the grants that you mentioned. So if anyone's intrigued about the grant program that Armando talked about and wants to learn more, Cedric, and I think some others from State Parks will be there tomorrow at the Kramer. Little plug. You talked about well, hearing the story of your first day 2.5 years ago, but also thinking of all the other things that you shared. You brought up time. So I'd love to kind of hang out in time, do some time meditation for a second. There is something unique, from my perspective, about this moment in time, whether, taking into account what we know globally, the IPCC reports around this is the moment to take action, like right now, go. There's also with the governor's leadership and the leadership in the California Natural Resources Agency under Secretary Wade Crowfoot, there's a lot of support for the work that Together Bay Area members and partners do. There's also a lot of funding thanks to the legislature and in partnership with the governor and as well as what's happening in federal funding as well. So there's money, there's leadership, there's a clear need to take action and change some of the systems. And I'm curious how does hurrying up and slowing down happen for you? Like that sense of urgency to take action, but also the moving at the speed of relationships or trust. And I'd love to hear how you kind of think about meeting the moment in that way.
Sure, thank you. It's a wonderful, wonderful setup, Annie, thanks. Somebody who I can call a friend is Gary Snyder. And one time on a trip that I put together for a group of artists, writers, and scientists in the wilderness, which Gary participated in, he said something during an argument, and I loved it. And he basically said his favorite Buddhist saying is, "Not knowing is best." And the way that I take that in to my role, if I tried to pretend that I know everything that I need to know to be able to do this job, I would be a fool. So honestly, I begin things with an acknowledgement of my vulnerability, of my own naivete, and the opportunity to deepen my knowledge about the things I'm working with and who I'm working with and how I'm working with those folks. And something that I am really supporting, and we did a test at State Parks in the last several months. We offered emotional intelligence training to folks, and I wasn't sure how many people would subscribe, but 100 subscriptions disappeared in a week. And the response we got from the employees that took this training was such that I think we're going to be offering emotional intelligence training for all employees. And so meeting the moment begins, I think, where how we position ourselves to be receptive, to be able to see it, to be curious, to not think the answer. And I truly believe, in fact, I find myself repeating versions of this, that there is genius everywhere and in everyone. And so in my role as a leader in this department, I really like to treat people in a way so that they know they're seen, that they matter, and that I want to hear what they have to say, even if they're terrified that I'm not going to agree with it at all. And what I have found in working with teams here, and this is about meeting the moment, is I'll pull together teams and we'll be talking about a project or an idea, and I don't direct it. I go like, what's our objective? And we just talk about the objective. And then honestly, I get out of the way. And it's perhaps one of the biggest gifts that I've encountered in this role, when you really support folks, you empower them, and then they look at the problems and they come back generally with curiosity and ideas that honestly 100% way beyond anything I would have imagined. So much better and award-winning. I mean, literally, I see teams in state parks, and I think I can say this openly because it's true. There are teams in state parks that have done work that is now getting adopted by the whole resources agency.
Mm.
That wasn't our objective. It was like, how do we do this better? And how do we integrate? How do we reflect the world that we're serving and the world of which we are a part? I mean, it's funny. I feel like I'm praying right now while I'm talking to you guys, because it is, I mean, that's sort of it. I don't know. That was a
Mhm.
long wander too.
No,
Very
no,
good.
it's how it, what I hear lots of things. One of the things I hear is in meeting the moment is not in a um, ego-driven, controlling, uh, planned way. It's not a linear
Right.
checklist. It's a way of showing up is how you're meeting the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And
That's it.
and I also hear that's powerful as a human being. I mean, as Armando Quintero, and that's also very notable from my perspective as Armando Quintero as state parks director. I mean, you work for a very large bureaucratic
Oh yeah.
entity, the state of California. I mean, it's, and I'm curious how has that been met? I mean, I imagine some people are like hungry but I wonder if there's also been resistance to a different way of showing up and how is that manifested or how is that how have you
Interesting.
been dealing with it?
Yeah. And that's, again, great question, Annie. I think that the resistance that I can sense, because you know what, as director, you don't get to really see what's going on. And I also, I remind myself of that is I get the very clean version, the very, the sort of protected version. I think of myself when I was a park aide or a volunteer or park ranger, and how I felt when the big boss came in or the big bosses. And actually one of the things that informs my work is I honestly treat people the way I wished I had been treated when I was doing any of the jobs that I was doing as a volunteer, as a ranger, as a park aide, as anything that I did. And trying to really remember the things that really were heartening, and also do the opposite of the things that were harmful to me and others, I think. But I also think that I talked about being vulnerable, and vulnerability means being emotionally engaged with things.
Mm.
And if we are looking at what we're doing, you probably should be getting emotional. I was talking before we came into the big room that, I live in Marin and drive to Sacramento, and it's a 1.5 hour commute, but I think of my commute as a trip upriver through one of the most incredible bays and valleys in the world. And it is honestly, it is almost, except for crazy driving, it's an absolute joy and beauty. I mean, it's amazing to me. And then when I go home, I'm just going downriver again, a long ways from the redwood canoes of the Yurok. But I'm in my solar powered car, so it's not bad. But what, I don't know why I said all that, but anyway, it's funny. The picture that's in the background here, by the way, it's a picture of the Tuolumne River that's at the north boundary of Dos Rios Preserve, which is going to be the newest state park in the system. It's called Dos Rios State. It will be Dos Rios State Park. It's at the confluence of the San Joaquin River and the Tuolumne. So you're looking in this image, what you're looking at is just hundreds of yards from where the Tuolumne becomes the San Joaquin River. And it is a place that for me feels like you're in the African savannah, 20 minutes from Modesto. It's like otherworldly. And I think that when I have taken my boss as Secretary of Resources and gone to places like with him, the most effective thing that I can do is be silent. and listen. And I just love when I'm in places and people start going like, oh, wow. And they start seeing it for themselves, which is really, a sense of ownership. And I think that when we do our work in this department, that really is the job. Ultimately, that should be our job. And I'm going to go back to an experience, and that is when I was working as a ranger at Point Reyes Seashore, and I was learning how to talk about gray whales during their migration. I was out at the lighthouse, and it was classic. Okay, watch how we do it, and then you do it. And the rangers would stand out on the deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Everybody would face the ranger. Ranger had their back to the ocean. They'd hold up this model of a whale and hold up baleen and talk about all these things. And I didn't go to parks a lot when I was a kid. In fact, I just went to city parks and stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm learning some storytelling stuff here. But when they said, okay, Armando, you do it, what I did is I got the audience already, set them up just like I'd seen the other rangers do. And I said, okay, do not turn around. And I stood behind them and I said, my job is to teach you how to look at the ocean. Because people don't know what a whale looks like when it's a mile out to sea, and that it's just,
Right.
it's a little breakfast sausage from 20 yards jumping out of the water, and so it's perspective, it's scale,
Yeah,
it's all those things. And so when I think about working in this huge bureaucratic system, personally, my best job, the best work I can do is deliver emotional content. And sometimes that means, if you're paying attention, I think there are stories that absolutely will bring up a welling of tears and emotion and people choking up. I have two daughters who are now 29 and 27. One's a nurse, the other's a scientist. And they did a lot of stuff with me over the years, even when I was leading trips. And they both have said, Dad, why do you like to make people cry? And I hope it's not because I'm boring them to tears, but really, it's like, I think we need to crack ourselves open. And and oh my goodness, the work with the tribes has been just a treasure chest of that. And
Can I ask,
Yeah.
segue from points you've just made to that, actually? And one of the things I've seen you do in your role is, and you've spoken a little bit, but you haven't, I want to really
Sure.
hang out there for a minute, is the power of showing up.
Yeah.
And how our culture, American generally, it's very productive. It's very efficient. It's very about getting stuff done. It's to-do lists and email inboxes and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes what we need to do is actually just be. Can you,
Sure.
I think you have a story or two about power of showing up.
There's a bunch. But what I will say, the framing of this is that when I go to a park, I make sure that I schedule myself time to be alone, to get there early, to stay late, to go on hikes to go do some discovery on my own, and to just sit. And it changes, what I say. And because I base what I say on what I'm observing and feeling. And last year, I went down to Año Nuevo to sign an MOU with the Amamutsan tribe. And the Amamutsan, and it was an MOU that is a co-management agreement. And they're doing the Amamutsan people are doing a bunch of work in restoring the landscape on the east side, or sections of landscape on the east side of Highway 1 from Año Nuevo State Park. We went up and toured that area, and we had elders with us and park staff and the public. And then we came back to where the visitor center is at Año Nuevo, which, for those of you who've been there and those of you who haven't, there's a big barn on top of the coastal plain, and that's the visitor center. And there was a small table set up for Chairman Val and myself to sign this MOU. And we were sitting with our backs to the coastal plain, and behind us you could see a trail, the beautiful trail that just wanders out about a third of a mile before it drops down to the beaches where you can see elephant seals. And I'm looking at this audience of people, and I'm sitting with the chairman, and I said a few introductory words. Chairman sang a prayer, said a few words, and then I thought, I need to tell a story because I feel like it fits. And I said to the judge, I said, can I tell a quick story? And he said, yes. And here it is. And I told, this is what I said to the group. I said, you know, when my younger daughter was in 4th grade, I took her there for a field trip with her class to see elephant seals. And I brought my mom along, and my mom had Alzheimer's and was in the early stages. So she could walk and talk, albeit a bit confused, but it was, you know, she's very joyful during that illness. But anyway, the kids started walking to the beach. I started following them, and I realized my mom couldn't walk that far. So the kids continued to the beach, and my mom and I were just walking out on this stunning coastal plain. It was a beautiful day, just like the day that we were signing the MOU. And my mom stopped and she looked at me and she said, "Mijo, is this heaven?"
Wow.
And I said, "Yeah, Mom, it is." She started dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said that, the elders in the audience immediately all said, "Oh, oh, oh." And so I turned to the chairman and I said, "So here's the dancing in heaven. There's a moment. There's something that I will never forget, you know, and it wasn't designed. And I've had the privilege of spending time with the governor and other leaders. In fact, a little over a week ago, I got to have lunch at an Earth Day event, and I was sitting with oh geez, the woman who started Chez Panisse,
Alice Waters.
Alice Waters, yeah, or Alice Water, and it actually was Alice Water and the governor and the first partner and Wade, and we were talking about farms to schools and, you know, edible schoolyards and all of those things, and it was pretty amazing. And our Surgeon General for California was to my right, and she's a Latina who's just amazing. And also Dolores Huerta was there too. I mean, that was the table. And we're talking about these things. And then the governor said, "So Armando, say something about parks." And, you know, and I had been typing notes on my phone, you know, because I was listening to the conversation and thinking, and I said, and I looked at Alice Waters and I said, "Farm to Parks." And it turned into this whole conversation, which included, and here we go. So how do we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and where the work that we do fits? And maybe what else should we be looking at where we can? You know, and for me, one way that we've been doing it at parks has been access. Very quickly, I was charged with, you know, do something that has to do with access. So I stole an idea from Marin County, which was the library folks and the public lands folks in Marin County put together a park pass that you could check out at the library. So we put together a library park pass that you can check, and went to the legislature. They funded 33,000 of these. I have to hold it like this because of my fake background. It'll disappear if I put it up here. But this is a mirror. This is you know, hangs on your mirror, and it actually sort of looks like something from Harry Potter.
Yeah,
and
it does. Looks very fancy. It doesn't look very like government-y.
Well, guess what? This is what happens when you tell folks, "Hey, go do something." This is what came back. And you know what? I don't have it immediately handy, but the graphic artist that did this, she did a poster, which is one of the most stunning things. And it's split up in the, there's a line up the middle. And on one side, there's a child's hand reaching to a moss covered trunk of an oak tree.
Mm.
And on the other side is a bookshelf with a stack of books and a kid's hand reaching.
Oh, wow.
For shelf.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And so 33,000 of these passes went out to all the libraries in California and all of the tribal libraries. And we also have something called the Golden Bear Pass, which has always been available for people who get Department of Social Services support. And we amped it up. We made it easier for people to get that. In the past, social services recipients maybe got 1,200 of these out in a year. But by teaming up with the folks at Department of Social Services, 38,000 of those passes have gone out to people in need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then we stole an idea from National Parks, which is a 4th grade adventure pass. And that too has been wildly successful. And there's 28,000 of those that have gone out and counting. And so what we're now doing is we're looking at how do we make some version of this permanent? Because we will always have this group that is in that level of need. And the other thing is there's a QR code on here. And so we're doing surveys with all the users of these passes. We are getting the most amazing data. And most of the folks that are checking these out, the average income is $60,000. Most of the folks that check these out have not been to a state park before. And after using it, they're now saying, I'm going to go 3 and 4 times a year.
Wow. It's working.
Yeah. And
that's great.
that wasn't me. That wasn't me. That was the people I work with and other departments. And that's another thing that I think is really critical in terms of productivity and checking things off a list.
Yeah.
And that is that we need to be partnering with other organizations that Department of Social Services. And I think that it becomes, I think many of you know Jose Gonzalez. And I don't know if he made this up or not, but he's the person that said it, and I remember it. It's thinking about the work that we do as being a form of caring for mycelium. This huge network that connects all these different species, that is a pathway for energy and water and nutrients and knowledge. And that's what we need to be cultivating with each other together. I mean, that's you, that's all of you.
We do.
That's what we cultivate together. And then here's a fruiting body.
That's right.
Right? And we, in a way, these fruiting bodies are the product of everyone.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much for sharing that. And it really is a beautiful piece. And I know your time is short, and I want to get it, create an opportunity for everybody here to learn more about what we're doing at the conference this week and to meet each other. So I want to wrap up with a question for you, Armando. There's over 400 people coming to be in person tomorrow. What's one invitation that you have for them as we come together physically in person, but also, leaning into some of the things that you've talked about today? Do you have a piece of advice or a quote or a way of thinking that you'd like to kind of leave us with?
Oh, man. I think there's 3 things that we all share, and you will be in a room full of this. And honestly, I think it's love, compassion, and joy. And just hang out in that space together. And we live in an extraordinary time, with extraordinary challenges. It's scary as all hell and more magical than we can imagine. Man, what a privilege to be with you all and to be with a group of people doing the work that we are all doing, right?
Thank you so much, Armando.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure, and I hope that you'll come back to the on stage part of Together Bay Area before another 3 years goes by. And
I'm
I
gonna
also,
try to show up at the Crane tomorrow.
and
Yeah,
I
I'm
hope
gonna
that we
try.
get to see you in person, either tomorrow at the Craneway, or we will find another way to get you
Yeah.
to make this happen in person. But I'm so grateful to you and to your leadership and for you for joining. You have an idea. I can see it.
I mean, let's go for a hike.
All right, everybody, all 178 of you, let's go.
Yeah, we can-
Please, everyone, join me in thanking State Parks Director Quintero for joining us today. And thank you so much, Armando, for being here.